Miss Vere was sealing the last of the dowager's letters when the Duke of Calderne crossed the length of the ballroom and stopped in front of her chair. She did not look up at once. She had 3 letters left to seal, and Lady Burleigh was particular about her correspondence going out on the Morning Post, and a companion who lost her place at 25 did not easily find another. So she pressed the wafer, set the candle aside, and only then lifted her eyes to the man whom every unmarried woman in London had spent the season trying to stand near. He was looking not at her face, but at her hands, at the small stack of sealed letters, and at the topmost one, which was not the dowager's at all. It was her own, the one she carried always and never sent, and the wax upon it bore a crest she had spent 6 years keeping turned against her palm. She moved her hand to cover it. She was too slow. Something passed across his face, dark-eyed and severe, that she could not read and did not like, because it looked like recognition, and no one in this city was supposed to recognize anything about her at all. "Madam," said the Duke of Calderne, in a voice pitched to carry, "will you do me the honor of your hand?" For a moment the room did not understand him. Then it did, and it laughed. It began near the orchestra and ran outward like a dropped tray, the bright, disbelieving laughter of 200 people who had come expecting the Duke of Calderne to choose his duchess from among the season's diamonds, and were being shown, instead, a paid companion in a turned grey gown with ink on her second finger. Lady Burleigh's whist table went silent. A marchioness near the windows said, not quietly, "He cannot mean the companion," and her daughters tittered into their fans. Margaret felt the heat climb her throat and refused it permission to reach her face. She had been laughed at before. She had learned the only defense against it, which was to be more still than the people laughing, to give them nothing moving to mock. "Your Grace mistakes me for someone of consequence," she said. "No," said the Duke. "I don't." He did not flinch. He did not glance at the room to see how his joke had landed, because it was not a joke, and he did not soften it with a smile. He simply held out his scarred right hand, the back of it ridged with an old burn she would later learn the cause of, and waited, while 200 people laughed at him and he let them, as though their laughter were weather and he had a roof. She should have refused. A companion who danced with a duke on a whim would be ruined by Tuesday and unemployed by Friday. That was the arithmetic of her life. But he was looking at her the way no one had looked at her since her father died, as though she were a fact and not a charity. And beneath that look, unforgivably, was the letter, and the crest, and the certainty in his eyes that he had seen it and knew what it meant. "Why?" she said, very low, so that only he could hear. "Are you doing this?" "Because they have all decided who you are," he said just as low, "and not one of them has thought to ask. I have a particular dislike of that. I have spent my whole life being decided about." He inclined his head a fraction. "Dance with me, Miss Vere. Or whatever you would prefer I call you. I find I should like to hear which name you choose." She put her ink-stained hand into his scarred one, and the room's laughter curdled into a silence far more dangerous. And that was the first mistake either of them made. He danced badly, which surprised her. A man so certain in everything else moved through the figures with the stiff care of someone counting, and when she said so he said, without embarrassment, "I never learned properly. There was a war on during the years a gentleman is meant to learn to dance. I learned other things." He turned her, a half-beat late. "Your father taught me one of them." The figure carried them apart before she could answer, which was perhaps why he had said it then, so that she would have the length of the room to compose her face. By the time they came back together, she had failed. "You did not know my father," she said. "Henry Vere, 4th Earl of Caradine. He pulled me out of a burning travelling coach outside Lisbon in the autumn of 1807. When I was 21 and a fool, and not worth the burn it cost him. He turned his scarred hand briefly palm up between them, then closed it. He spoke of a daughter. He said she had more sense than the whole Foreign Office, and that he meant to keep her out of it. He did not tell me she would end as a companion to Hester Brearley, sealing another woman's letters and hiding her own. "My father," said Margaret, "is dead. I know. I came back from the peninsula in 1810 to thank him, and found him 3 months in his grave and his daughter nowhere anyone could name." The music was ending. He did not let go of her hand. "I have been looking for Henry Vere's daughter for 6 years. Miss Vere. I had begun to think the family that buried his name had buried her with it. And then, a fortnight ago, I watched a dowager's companion put a crest on a letter she will never post, and turn the seal against her palm so no one would see it, and I thought, there she is. There is the only person in England who has the right to that crest and refuses to use it." The dance was over. All around them, couples were separating, and eyes were on the two of them standing too long together, and she knew with absolute clarity that she should walk away and never speak to him again. "You should not have done this," she said. "You have made me a spectacle. By tomorrow I will have no place. Then come and be a spectacle on my arm instead." His severity cracked, just for an instant, into something younger and far less guarded. "I have asked badly. I see that. I am better at deciding than at courting. I have had more practice. But I did not point to you across that room because I pitied you. I pointed to you because you are the only woman in it I would not have to spend my life being lied to by. That is worth more to me than a fortune. It is the one thing my fortune has never once bought me." That night she lay awake in the narrow room at the top of Lady Brearley's house, the unsent letter on the table beside her, and she did the thing she had taught herself never to do. She let herself want something. It was a great deal more frightening than being laughed at. She did not have to wonder long what it would cost. The story moved faster than she did. By the time she came down the next morning, Lady Brearley had already heard 3 versions of it. And the dowager, who was 80 if she was a day, and afraid of nothing living, looked at her over the rim of her chocolate and said, "Sit down, child. Calderne danced with you, and the cats are sharpening themselves, and I will not have you walk out into it without your wits about you. Tell me true. Is it the title he's after or you?" "He says it is me." The old woman's eyes were small and very bright. "And what do you say?" "I say," said Margaret, "that I have spent 6 years being no one in particular on purpose, and a duke has just made that impossible, and I do not thank him for it." "No," said Lady Brearley, "I don't suppose you do. You were always going to be hard to do a kindness to. I've watched you flinch from every one I've tried." She set down her cup. "I knew your father. I knew your mother better. She was the cleverest of the Queen's women, and the kindest, which is a rarer thing. When she died, I wrote to ask after you, and was told the Calderne household had no further use for a former companion's sentiment." Her mouth thinned. "Your cousin's doing that. Rupert never did know the difference between inheriting a thing and deserving it." Margaret's hands went still on the tablecloth. "You knew? That you are Lady Margaret Vere and not Miss Anybody?" "Of course I knew. I do not employ people I have not troubled to look into. That is how women like the Marchioness lose their silver." The dowager's voice gentled, which was somehow worse. "I never said it because you so plainly did not wish it said. But I will say this now, while there is still time for it to matter. You did not take a companion's place to hide, Margaret. You took it to punish yourself for being valued by a name when your father was alive and worthless, without it, now that he is dead. That is not humility, that is grief, wearing humility's coat." He courted her in the days that followed with the same blunt determination he brought to everything, and she discovered to her dismay that she could not make him ridiculous, however hard she tried. "You needn't keep calling. she told him on the second afternoon, walking the dowager's small walled garden because Lady Brearley had declared the drawing-room too full of ears. It is observed. Every call is another paragraph in the story they are telling. The companion who got above herself. Let them count the calls, said Gabriel. I should like the number to be large. I find I resent the years I did not know to make it. He matched his stride to hers, hands clasped behind him. Tell me something true, since you will not be flattered. What did you mean to be, before your father died? A girl who outwitted the Foreign Office must have meant to be something. She had not been asked that in 6 years. The plainness of it disarmed her more than any gallantry could have. A translator, she said, surprising herself. My father let me sit in on the dispatches. I have 4 languages and a 5th I can read. I used to mark the places where the French envoy lied. They have a particular way of it, very polite. My father said I had the only honest ear in Lisbon. She stopped, embarrassed. It is a useless accomplishment for a companion. It is a wasted one, he corrected. That is a different word, and a graver fault, and not yours. He looked at her with that disconcerting directness. You see why I will not stop calling. I have met a great many women this season who were assembled to be looked at. You are the first I have wanted to listen to. I am 30 years old, and I had begun to think the want had died in me. It is unnerving to find it has only been waiting. You say these things, she said, as though they cost you nothing. They cost me a great deal. I simply think the price worth paying once, plainly, rather than dribbled out in compliments that mean less. He smiled, and the severity went out of his face. Your turn. Say one thing you mean and cannot take back. I shall not tease you for it. I am no good at teasing. I told you there was a war on, and because he had asked, and because no one asked her anything, she said it. I am afraid that if I let you, I shall stop being able to do without you. I have been very careful, for 6 years, to be able to do without everything. It was the most reckless sentence of her life. He received it like a gift, and did not spoil it with an answer, only walked the rest of the path in a silence so warm she could have wept in it. Her cousin came 3 days later and put an end to the warmth. He came as a morning caller, which was its own insolence. Rupert Vere, 5th Earl of Calderne, florid and prosperous in a coat that cost more than Margaret earned in 3 years, the Calderne's signet fat on his finger. The same crest she carried turned against her palm, the same lion and 3 stars her father had pressed into the wax of the letter she never sent. He wore her name on his hand like a ring he had won at cards. Cousin Margaret, he said, filling the dowager's small drawing-room. I had heard the most extraordinary thing and could not credit it, so I came to see for myself. They are saying the Duke of Calderne made an exhibition of himself over a paid companion. And here is the companion, and she has your aunt's chin, God rest her. Margaret, after all these years. You look tired. Lord Calderne, she said, because she would not call him cousin, and would not call that title by the only other name it had ever meant to her. Now, I don't wish to be unkind. He sat without being asked. But someone must speak to you plainly, and who better than your own blood? Whatever this Duke has promised you, it cannot survive what people will say once they remember. And they will remember. Margaret, they will remember that your father died abroad with his affairs in ruin, and his name a byword, that there was no fortune left, that you went into service because there was nowhere else for a girl with a disgraced earl for a father to go. A duke may dance with such a girl. He cannot marry her. His family will not allow it, and if by some madness he insists, I shall feel it my sad duty, as head of your house, to confirm the worst of it. For his sake, for the family's. He smiled. You do see. She saw entirely. She saw the shape of it the way her father had taught her to see the shape of a treaty, what was said, and underneath it what was meant. What was meant was, marry your duke and become a duchess, and a duchess has the standing to reopen a will I forged, and I cannot have that, so I will burn your name to the ground before you can climb it." "You did not come to spare me," she said. "You came because a duchess could ask questions in chancery that a companion cannot. You took the money my father left me. Rupert, you did not stop at the title the law gave you. You forged the rest, and then you told the world he died in disgrace so that no one would wonder where £40,000 had gone. I have known it for 6 years. I simply had no one to tell who would not have laughed." For one instant the florid good humour dropped from his face, and she saw the thing beneath it, which was fear, because she was right, and he had not expected her to say it to his face. Then it returned, smooth as oil. "You always did have your mother's imagination," he said, rising. "Take care, cousin. A nameless woman who slanders an earl is a woman who ends in a great deal of trouble. I should hate to see you in more than you are already." He bowed to the dowager, who did not acknowledge it. "Do think on what I've said." When the door had closed, Lady Brearley let out a long breath. "Well," she said, "now you have told him you know. That was either very brave or very stupid, and I have lived long enough not to be certain which until it's over." It was. Margaret would think afterward, the last truly quiet hour she was to have for some time. She spent part of it where Calderne found her that evening, in the dusk of the dowager's little library, because he had taken to coming at the unfashionable hours when callers had gone, as though her time were worth keeping and not merely filling. "You are angry," he said from the doorway. "Brearley's footman told me your cousin called. What did he want?" "He wants what he has always wanted. For me to be no one." She turned from the window. "He threatened you, in the gentlest possible words. He will make my father's name a scandal, and yours along with it. He can do it. He has spent 6 years building the lie, and I have spent them letting him, because the alternative was to fight him as Lady Margaret Vere, and I swore I would never again ask the world to value me for a name." Her voice did not shake, which cost her something. "You should go, Your Grace. You have a great deal to lose, and I am not worth 1/10 of it." He crossed the room. He was very close now, closer than the rules allowed, close enough that she could see the burn scar at his wrist and the place where his certainty wore thin. "Do not," he said, "tell me what you are worth. You have been let do that sum by people who got it wrong on purpose." His scarred hand came up, not quite touching her face. "Margaret, I have spent my life being wanted for a thing I did nothing to earn. You have spent yours refusing to be wanted for a thing you did nothing to earn either. We are the same wound facing opposite ways. I did not look for Henry Vere's daughter for 6 years to lose her to her own pride in a library." The air had gone out of the room. She felt the warmth of his hand a half-inch from her cheek, and she wanted, God help her, to close that half-inch herself. And she watched him want it too, watched his head bend. The door opened. A maid with a taper, blandly murderous in her timing, come to light the lamps. They stepped apart. The moment did not so much break as evaporate, leaving the unbearable knowledge of how near it had come. And the maid lit the lamps one by one while neither of them said a word, and when she had gone the spell would not be coaxed back. "Stop," Margaret said, before he could speak, because she had seen the apology forming. "Stop apologizing. I am not the one you have wronged, and I will not be courted as though I were made of glass your family broke. If you mean to have me, then for God's sake stop being sorry about it and tell me plainly what you intend to do. About your mother, about my cousin, about the whole laughing room. Decide with me, or do not decide at all. I have had enough of being decided about, even kindly." It was the most either of them had ever asked of the other, and it hung there. And then he laughed, a real one, surprised out of him, and said, "There she is again," and she understood that she had just, irrevocably, let him in. What he intended to do, he did 3 days later, And he did it in public. Because the only answer to a thing said in front of 200 people is a thing said in front of 200 people. The Dowager Duchess of Calderne, his mother, who had not approved and had said so at length, held a dinner to which all the right people came expecting the Duke to be brought, at last, to his senses. Instead he rose between the courses, before the soup had gone cold, and said that he wished to make an announcement while his mother's friends were assembled to hear it, since they had been so generous with their opinions on the matter. "You have heard," he said, "that I intend to marry a companion. It is half true. I intend to marry Miss Vere. The companion part will end when she does me the honor. The marriage, I hope, will not." A ripple, his mother's hand whitening on her glass. "I am told it will cost me. That her father's name is a scandal. That her family will confirm it. That no fortune attends her and a good deal of mockery does. I have considered all of it." He set down his napkin, "and I find I would rather spend my title on a woman who has never once wanted it than save it for one who wants nothing else. If that ruins me, then I was more cheaply made than I hoped. I will marry her with your blessing, or without it. I should prefer with. But I have decided, and I am done pretending the decision is anyone's but mine." His mother left the room. A third of the guests, scenting which way the wind would set, suddenly recalled urgent admiration for the Duke's constancy. The rest went home to write letters. And Margaret, who had not been warned, and who watched the whole of it from the foot of the table, with her heart going like a drum, understood that he had just burned a bridge no Duke burns, and had done it not to rescue her, but to stand beside her, which was a far harder thing to forgive, and a far easier thing to love. Rupert struck back within the week, and he struck at the one thing she had thought beyond even his reach. The papers came to Lady Brearley's house by a clerk, formally served, a bill filed in Chancery by the Earl of Calderne, asserting that the late Earl's marriage to one Eleanor Sackville had been irregular and unrecorded, that the woman calling herself Lady Margaret Vere was therefore no daughter of the house at all, possessed of no name, no claim, and no standing to contest any disposition of the Calderne estate. He had not merely buried her name, he had moved to prove she had never owned one, to make her, in the eye of the law, precisely the no-one she had spent 6 years pretending to be. She read it through twice in the cold morning light. Then she sat very still for a long time, and Lady Brearley, watching, did not speak, because some blows must be allowed to land before anything can be said over them. "He has made it true," Margaret said at last. Her voice was steady, and that was the worst of it. "Everything I let the world believe he is about to make law. If he wins, Gabriel marries a woman with no father, and no name in fact as well as in rumor, and his ruin is complete. And it will be my doing. Because I was too proud to fight while fighting was easy, and now it is too late." She folded the paper along its creases. "I have to go, while he can still draw back from it. I will not watch him burn to the ground for a no-one." "And the letter," said the Dowager quietly. "The one you carry and never send. I have watched you finger it for 2 years. What is in it, Margaret?" Margaret's hand had gone, without her leave, to the reticule at her wrist. "My father wrote it the week before he died," she said. "To the Queen. My mother was her friend. The Queen stood my godmother when I was christened. He wrote to commend me to her care, and to set down, in his own hand and under his own seal, the truth of what Rupert had already begun to do to his estate. He gave it to me and told me to send it if ever I needed it. I never sent it." Her eyes were wet now and furious. "Because to send it was to say, 'I am Lady Margaret Vere, daughter of an earl, goddaughter of a queen, value me accordingly.' And I could not. I would rather have starved as no one than be loved for a name again. A breath. I have been about to send it for 6 years. I have never once been brave enough." Lady Brearley reached across the table and put her old hand over Margaret's young one, over the reticule and the letter inside it. "Then be brave enough now," she said, "not to save your name. to save him. There is a difference, and you have been too proud to see it, and you do not have time to be proud any longer. She sent it that afternoon. She broke nothing of her father's seal. She wrapped his sealed letter inside one of her own, in which she wrote, simply, that she was Eleanor Sackville's daughter, that her godmother had once promised her mother she would not be forgotten, and that she was calling once and for only this once, upon that promise. Not for herself, but for an honest man about to be ruined for the crime of having asked her name. Then she gave it to the post, and went back to sealing the dowager's correspondence, because the work did not stop merely because one's life had, and waiting is easier with ink on one's fingers. The answer arrived at the worst and therefore the most perfect moment, at the great public assembly at the end of the season, the one ball everyone attended, where Rupert had taken care to be seen, and where the story of the Duke and the nameless companion had reached its full and savoured height. Margaret had come because Lady Brearley refused to let her hide, and Gabriel had come because he would not let her stand alone, and Rupert had come to enjoy himself. And for the better part of an hour the room got everything it wanted, which was to watch. Then there was a stir at the doors, and a silence ran inward from them, the opposite of laughter, and into the assembly came a gentleman in the Queen's own livery, with two others behind him, and he asked in a clear carrying voice for Lady Margaret Vere. No one moved. The name meant nothing to most of them. They knew of no such person in the room. Then Margaret stepped forward, and the connection was made in 200 minds at once with an almost audible sound. "I am Margaret Vere," she said. The Queen's messenger bowed to the companion, low and unmistakable, and held out a letter sealed with the royal arms. "Her Majesty bids me deliver this into your hand, my lady, and to say, before such company as is present, that she has read your father's letter and her own heart, and that the goddaughter of the Queen of England wants for no name, while the Queen has breath to give her one." He straightened. "Her Majesty further desires it known that the irregularities lately alleged in the Calderne succession have engaged the Crown's interest, and that a man who would forge a dead friend's will and slander his orphan child does so now under the eye of his sovereign. You are expected at court on Thursday, Lady Margaret. Her Majesty would not have it said you came to her by the servant's stair." The room did not laugh. The room could not have made any sound at all. Margaret took the letter and turned, in the perfect ringing silence, to where Rupert Vere stood with the Calderne signet on his hand and all the blood gone out of his face. "You wore my father's crest," she said, not loudly, into the quiet that carried every word to every corner. "You took his money and you took his good name, and you tried to take the very fact of me, so that no one would be left to remember what you'd done. You forgot one thing, cousin. He gave me the name himself, in his own hand, before he died. You cannot forge that away. It was never yours to bury." She held up the unbroken letter, her father's seal beneath the Queen's. "Ask me my name now." He did not. He could not. He turned and walked out through a crowd that drew back from him as from something diseased, and he was gone from London within the month and from England within the year. And the Calderne estate went into chancery and came out, in time restored. Gabriel reached her side as the doors closed behind her cousin. He did not touch her. The room was watching, and he had ruined her enough for one season. But he looked at her with the whole of what he was, undefended now in front of everyone. "You did that yourself," he said. "I only watched." "You chose me before there was a letter," she answered. "In front of all of them, when I was no one, when it could only cost you. That was the braver thing, and we both know it." She was not still now. She had stopped being still. Her face was doing every undisciplined thing she had spent 6 years forbidding it. "I have spent my life refusing to be wanted for a name. I did not know until you how badly I wanted to be wanted in spite of one. Ask me, Gabriel, properly, here." where they can all hear you do it. So he did, there in the hush, with 200 people who had laughed at him now straining not to miss a word. And she said yes before he had finished, which was unforgivably forward and exactly right. And when he kissed her, the assembly forgot itself entirely and made a sound that was against every expectation, not laughter but something far rarer in that room, which was applause. They were married before Michaelmas, quietly, the Queen's gift of plate on the table and Lady Brearley weeping into her good lace and denying it ferociously. A year on a wet bright morning at Calderne, the Duchess of Calderne sat at a desk in the long library and sealed her letters herself, as she had always done, save that the seal she used now was her own, and she pressed it crest upward without a thought. Her husband, who still danced badly and no longer apologized for it, came and read over her shoulder a line he was not meant to see, and was kissed away from it. Rupert Vere had died abroad. They heard, in much the reduced and friendless circumstances he had once invented for her father, the Carradine fortune long since clawed back through the courts and settled where her father had meant it. She had given the bulk of it away. She found she had no appetite for being valued by it, and at last she could afford the joke. Her father's letter, its seal at last unbroken no longer, lay framed above the library hearth beside her mother's miniature, the letter she had carried 6 years and never sent, opened now, not in fear but in peace, his hand steady on the page, his love for her plain in every line. The name she had run from written there in the one place it had only ever meant that she was loved. Their daughter, when she came the following spring, was christened Eleanor, after the cleverest and kindest of the Queen's women, and the Queen herself stood godmother, and made, by the doing of it, one more child in England, who would never have to wonder whether her name was worth the asking. They laughed, Gabriel said, the morning of the christening, watching her settle the sleeping child. That first night. The whole room. I have never told you how it sounded. You didn't flinch, Margaret said. No. He touched the baby's hand, and the burn scar caught the light. I already knew what they didn't. He looked at his wife, who was no longer hiding from anything, least of all from being loved. I knew her name.